Hey guys, what's up and welcome to another episode of the GoodCastShow. So my guest today is an activist who's passionate about issues pertaining to gender, human rights and grassroots community development. She has over 18 years of experience in social activism and local and regional civil society organizations. She's the executive director with the Women's Aid organization, working to build empowered communities and ending violence against women and advocating for gender equality. A feminist and socialist at heart. My goodness, one of those is trouble enough. Now there's two.
Oh, wow.
She has an immense zeal for working with people to improve the well-being of the community and is committed to contributing in the creation of better realities for humankind. My goodness, please welcome the amazing Nazreen Nizam. How are you today?
I'm good. Thank you, Vinod, for the introductions.
No worries. Yeah, that's what we do here. So how are you a feminist and a socialist? How did these two ideals come about?
I'm feminist because I believe in gender equality, and I'm a socialist because I think we need to smash the,
The
capitalists.
Well, I've had many socialists on, and that word capitalist agenda.
Well, that is the truth. That is the reality
truth.
of our, world order at the moment.
I agree with you.
We do need
I
to
agree
change
with you.
that.
I do agree with you.
Yeah.
So let's go straight to this. Today, our topic of discussion will be domestic violence. So, as always, we'll be sharing the links to the organization in all the description in the video. So, you guys want to contact them, you want to share your story, get some help, share some feedback, please feel free to do so. Now, let's start with this. Mm-hmm. Today, of course, you are the executive director of Women's Aid organization. What is the primary objective of this organization?
So our primary objective of our mission of WAO is to end violence against women and achieve gender equality in Malaysia. And we do that through our advocacy work, our capacity building initiative, and also our direct support services that we offer to survivors of gender-based violence.
Okay. Could you highlight, perhaps in your experience, some of the cases that you may have handled that stay in your mind, and how the organization came to the aid of these people?
Yeah. Okay. So WAO, Women's Aid Organization, we started like over 40 years ago, in 1982, right? We started by providing shelter to survivors of domestic violence. So most of the cases that we receive in the organization are domestic violence cases, but we are actually an organization that work on gender-based violence. So it's like a larger umbrella. So we also receive like rape cases, trafficking cases, sexual assault cases, and cases that if you ask me, cases that I handle personally, because I actually work mostly before I become the executive director of Women's Aid Organization, I was the capacity building director. So I work mostly on outreach and public education, awareness, giving training, right? But during the pandemic, during the COVID time, because our headline, we expanded it to 24 hours because we were receiving like many calls.
My goodness.
During the pandemic, our cases actually increased like about 3 to 4 times more.
During the pandemic?
During the pandemic, like 2020 to like between 2020 to like end of 2021, early 2022, our statistic memang naik lah. So during that time, obviously, because we don't have enough social workers handling cases, so we need to get colleagues from other departments that have experience of handling cases to basically step in, So during that time, I was like handling the hotline as well and handling cases, and I received like this one calls from a survivor. She's a young woman that just got married, and her husband is a police officer.
Okay.
So she's living in the police quarters. So she actually calling us for rescue. So
wow.
Yes, exactly. So it was very challenging, but somehow we managed to help her. At that time during pandemic, right? Social worker cannot go by themselves and all that kind of thing. So we got help from, some external parties like Grab people and stuff like that to assist, to help rescue her. And then she had to like jump from the first or the second floor, to
what was happening
rescue
to
herself. I mean, it's physical abuse, emotional abuse, and it's ongoing. and she just cannot find a way out, you know. Like in usually in abusive relationship, right? Women that don't usually make a um fast decision to just leave.
Yeah.
It always like
Takes time.
takes time, So when a woman choose to basically leave, that means they already make their decision that they cannot actually endure the abuse anymore, you know. So she did it. Then she came to our shelter. Of course, we took her to the hospital first, to check and everything, give her treatments and stuff like that. So that is like one of the case that I still remember lah. handling it.
Interesting because you on your website, as you said just now, you also do handle cases on trafficking. And I just want to go into that just for a bit because that's a very interesting case and interesting in the sense that nothing much is talked about it. How bad is trafficking a problem for in Malaysia?
I would say it's very bad, but it's not, as you said, it's not a. Maybe if you have not known someone who's being trafficked, or your friends doesn't, like it's not within your circle, then you think it doesn't happen, But it does happen because Malaysia is like one of the, we would say, destination country, right? Because our economy may be a little bit better than others in Southeast Asia, for example. So there was a lot of women, because I also worked in another organization that actually worked specifically on human trafficking, right? Where
Wow.
we'll have women who were deceived to come to Malaysia. Maybe they will say that, okay, you will give you like some factory worker atau admin, some office work, and then before you know it, you like being trafficked to do sex work in Malaysia, or even labor work, right? And then your passport was taken from you, and you have like no other place to go and stuff like that. So this happened in Malaysia, unfortunately.
Perhaps we should do another episode on that.
Yeah.
That's an interesting topic to get
Yeah,
into.
can speak to actually an organization that can know better about this situation.
Sure,
It's
sure.
Tenaga Nita.
Okay, it's not going to. I think I've read that in some of the articles that have come out on this issue of domestic violence. Yeah, please, if you can connect us, it'd be
Yeah,
nice to have a
definitely,
conversation. In your website, again, there's a lot of definitions of domestic violence. There's a lot of categories. So, what is your definition of domestic violence?
No, it's not like my definition.
No, okay, but your
It's
organization,
a
general, yeah.
definition. What is domestic violence?
No, but I want to know what you have to say.
So domestic violence is basically a pattern of abusive behavior that's used by one person in a relationship over another person to exert control. So it can be another person in either a domestic relationship or intimate relationship. I will explain this later.
Please.
More. Okay, so it can include physical. It can also be emotional. It can be sexual. It can be financial. So a different type of abuse, right? So what I mentioned just now about domestic and also intimate. So in our domestic violence, in Malaysia, we have a Domestic Violence Act. Okay, so the perpetrator or the survivors under our act can be like spouses or ex-spouses. It can also be siblings. It can also be parents and children. It's not necessary just married people or spouses.
Couples, yeah.
But unfortunately, under our law, it doesn't cover intimate partners. Meaning, like if you are not married, then you cannot get protection under the Domestic Violence Act. So this is the gap that we have in the law currently, that WAO definitely looking to close the gap lah, to advocate that so that the intimate partners, like whether you boyfriend, girlfriend, fiance and everything, you can also get protection under the Domestic Violence Act.
Okay. So, but I was reading up about intimate violence as well. Intimate
partner violence.
Intimate partner violence, right? What is that exactly?
So it's the same thing as basically, when what I mentioned just now, when one person in the relationship, abuse the other person in the relationship, there's a pattern of behavior lah. It can be physical or emotional or sexual or financial, right? So the reason why they do that is to control the other person in the relationship. And why, if you ask why this happened, why is there a tendency of domestic violence, is what we always, uh, you know, what we always say, what we always advocate is that because there's always this perception, or what we always hear, that people say, oh, because the husband is stressed, or there's a drug abuse, or because of alcohol and stuff like that. That is what we say that is contributing factors or stresses. It's not the root cause. The root cause is always because there's an imbalance of power in the relationship. When the power is not balanced. Because if, like, say you are stressed, you stress at work, you have financial problem, you still choose who you go and beat up, right? You
Of
don't
course,
go.
you make that choice.
Yeah, you make that choice. You are not going to, like, if you're angry with your boss, you're not going to go and beat up your boss or your colleagues, because you don't have power over them. You still go home and choose to beat up your wife and your children. So this is something that we need to remember lah. The root cause of violence is always the imbalance of the
But
power
I
dynamics.
think it's good for us to perhaps dive into other areas, because in your website there are different categories of abuse. I think, of course, generally in the media, because there are people who have posted pictures of them with black eyes and all that, the focus is more on physical. But what are the others? And you also did mention emotional, but what are the other types of abuses that can occur in a relationship?
Yeah, I mean, like, okay, so when you talk about emotional abuse, what are emotional abuse? Can be gaslighting, can be manipulation. It can, anything that non-physical. It can be isolation, right? You don't allow your wife to go and meet her friends, or it can be the other way around, right? All this non-physical, it can be a threat. You don't beat your spouse, but you threat them. You're threatening them. And then in terms of what I said just now, sexual abuse, obviously, sexual abuse, and then financial abuse. When, for example, you control the money in the family. We have cases where the wife is working, but the husband is the one that hold the debit card. It happens.
Even
Yeah,
today.
it happens. And then there's also cases where the partner took a loan from the bank under the wife's name. Okay, and then maybe you can ask questions like, okay, why did the wife sign the form lah? If she didn't sign, she will not. But you have to understand, in a relationship, sometimes this manipulation happen, right? You may not agree to certain things, but you do it because you feel that you had to do it.
Yeah, you have to.
You have no other way. This is your husband. Maybe this person taking the loan or buying the car is for the family. You always want to think good of the person that you choose to marry, right? So that is, some type of the abuse that happen lah.
Now,
Not just physical.
again, previously you talked about intimate partner violence, right? Where do they go to if they are facing what you just said?
Okay, so for intimate partner violence, okay, see, the Domestic Violence Act is an act that must be read with another act, because Domestic Violence Act covers, like, okay, who are the perpetrators, who are the victims, what are the type of abuse that can happen, and also it offers protection if you want to get, like, either emergency protection order, the interim protection order, or the protection order lah, so intimate partner violence survivors, they does not fall under the current Domestic Violence Act. So what they can do is they can still, if, like, say there's a physical hurt, they can still go and make a police report. But it's just they cannot get that protection under Domestic Violence Act. So they must, like, get a restraining order from court, But the crime can still be the crimes that under Domestic Violence Act lah. If, like, say there's grievous hurt and stuff like that.
But do you think that revision in the Domestic Act would ever happen? Because if it were to happen, if they were to cover unmarried couples, That means that would be sort of like the government admitting that it condones premarital relationships.
Yeah, you're thinking exactly like the government. So this is
I should be a politician then.
yeah, you should totally. So this is always the challenge that we face, because that is the thinking, right? But we are saying that this is something that happened. In reality, is happening. It's not because when you say they're unmarried, that doesn't mean they live together, ma. I mean, it happens between boyfriend and girlfriend who are not living together. They are in university, they're studying, they are in a relationship, or they already engaged, right? But why do the thinking about, okay, they're unmarried, that means they're living together, and that's why violence happen. Violence doesn't only happen in the house. It can happen outside also.
Yeah.
So this is the things that we need to advocate for, that we need to, because we receive these cases in WAO. If we are talking based on our data. We receive these cases. I mean, I don't have the numbers now, I'm sorry. But every month we receive calls of women that face violence, intimate partner violence. They are not married to the perpetrator. So what do? How can they get protection? It should be easy for them also to get protection lah. They deserve to get protection.
On Netflix, there is a very interesting show that I recently watched, and I liked it. You guys should watch. It's called Maid, MAID. Very nice show.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah, and there is a scene where same thing. She leaves the house with the child and she goes to this shelter, right? And then after that, she meets this girl who said, who also is a victim of domestic violence and is there as well. But then she goes back to the guy. Have you ever, in your experience, seen this happening?
Of course.
A lot of times?
Yeah, it happens.
Why do they go back?
I won't say that a lot of time, but it happens.
Why? Why do they go back?
There are many reasons, okay? It's not I mean, there's many reasons. It can be like because they feel that, they don't want the children to grow up without the father. It can also be the social stigma if you are unmarried or jadi janda, in our society, right? And also, it could be also because they are dependent financially on the perpetrator, and it could be as simple as they still love that person, and they still have hope that this person can change. When we talk about the violence, right, domestic violence, there's these things that we call cycle of violence, right? Where the eruption, and then the calm period, then the eruption, and then the honeymoon period, because sometimes after they left the abusive household, left the abuser, and they come to the shelter. Of course, when they come to shelter, we'll say that, you shouldn't be in contact with the perpetrator because our shelter is confidential lah. We cannot we make sure that they tutup all the location and all that kind of things, cannot contact, cannot do video call and everything. But it can still happen, right? They could because our shelter also is an open shelter, it's not a closed shelter. Because, we need to empower the women if they still want to go to work, if it's safe for them lah, and the children go to school and all this kind of thing. So there could still be contact with the perpetrator. Then if the perpetrator kata, okay lah, abang minta maaf, I'm sorry, I promise I'm going to change, Or sometimes it could be like maybe she feels that, because sometimes it can also be because of the emotional manipulation and the gaslighting, that she in her head maybe justify the abuse as well, So this is the cycle that survivors go through. So for us in WAO, and I believe in other NGO that work with survivors of domestic violence as well, we always have a survivor-centric approach, okay, where we let the women decide. It's not for us to decide, because at the end of the day, it's not our life, it's their life, right? We'll go back to our family, we'll go back to our life. So we will give them options, option A, option B, option C. So they choose, So if they choose, after they stay with us and go through the program and everything, they still choose to go back. Of course, we do the safety planning with them. Okay, if it happens again, because we want them to know that if it happens again, they can always come back to us. And we are not here to judge you, because, the worst thing could happen also in domestic violence situation.
Yeah.
But so we want to know that they can always have a place in our organization, in our shelter, if they choose to come back, So yeah, they go back because of all that reason. Whether we as the service provider agree to it or not, we must respect their decision.
Okay. Now, of course, by somebody who goes through this does come out of it different, right? So, what is the impact of to someone's psyche, to someone's overall condition when they are a victim of domestic violence?
Yeah. I mean, when it's physical violence, I guess it's like, okay, you can see the injury, the physical injury, But the more deeper impact, I feel, is the psychological trauma that that the survivors go through lah, and face, like for example anxiety, depression, low self-esteem, PTSD, that make them even if, like, say, they already remove themselves from that abusive relationship. I think like from what I see, right, it's difficult for them to trust another person or have a healthy relationship later on, because they already like so traumatized with the experience that they have in the previous relationship lah.
We've been talking a lot about women, but do men suffer from domestic violence?
Yeah, of course, men also suffer from domestic violence, But, like as what we talk about just now, kan, that is statistically, it is fewer. But men do face similar physical and also psychological abuse. But we also must remember that there is an additional stigma when it comes to men, and also I feel there's also barriers lah for men when they want to seek help because of how our society, we live in a very patriarchal society with patriarchal values, right? If men come forward and say, I'm being abused by my partners, right? What do you think, mostly how would the response be? Kan? Either like make a joke of the people make a joke of it, because you're a man, how can you like be abused, tak jantan ke, you are not a lelaki, you're weak, so that's also some things that we need to talk about lah when we talk about men that are being abused, so that's the thing that I feel that we need to change this social stigma, or this stereotypes or gender norms.
Yeah, but interesting you say that because in your website, there was a study that I read called Malaysian Public Attitudes and Perceptions Towards Violence Against Women. Right?
Yes.
So the initial findings of the study identified that specific dimensions of violence endorsing attitudes are likely to be prevalent within Malaysian society. So what are these violence endorsing attitudes?
Okay. So maybe I just share a little bit about this
Sure.
survey lah, basically, that we did in 2021, and we conducted it online actually because it's during the pandemic, So the data set was like about 1,000 respondents, right? So we found the violence endorsing attitudes is very it's very scary also lah, this survey. Basically, attitudes that justify violence, trivializing abuse, justify violence by saying that, there must be a reason why this happened, or in a way, like there's also questions on child marriages, so there are respondents that oppose to it, but they still do not want to ban it, for example, so these are the type of what we say as violence endorsing attitudes lah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
You can actually go to our website and have the published, look at the published survey.
I think you guys also shared an infographic, which was quite interesting. And there was one where I think
correct.
majority of people thought that, a woman is raped because of how she dresses.
Exactly. Yes. Oh my God. Can you imagine in this day and age? So this victim blaming is a very, like something that we always do in our society, if women are being raped, then there's a question, okay, why did she go out at that time?
Correct.
What was she wearing?
Yeah.
You know, why did
She was drunk, so
Yeah,
it's
she
fine.
was drunk. You know, that as though if you drink alcohol, that is an invitation for people to rape you.
You have a sign
You
on your
know?
back.
Yeah, exactly. You know, so
Yeah,
this
it's
is it's very problematic lah, unfortunately.
We are still that kind of society, lah. Huh?
Yeah, we need to change it.
Yeah. No, but before I go to the next question, it's very interesting because you talked about, I think before this podcast we were talking, and you talked about how COVID time, you got a lot of calls. You had to open your hotline for
24
24 hours, right?
Yeah.
But that was not the only funny statistic, I would say, during that time, because during the COVID MCO, it resulted in a lot of divorces and all that kind of stuff, right? All these numbers went up.
Yeah.
So do you think that COVID basically made these couples, filtered out the couples that were not supposed to be together?
Yeah, maybe they realized during that time because they're always together and they realize, okay, maybe we don't actually match, you know?
Yeah.
Because when you are not always together, because you go and do your work, you know, for like 8-10 hours of a day, you come home, then maybe you have children and you do other things, right? But when you are like put together for 24 hours, and then you realize that I don't think this is working.
And if you can survive that, then that's true love.
Yes, maybe.
So recently, of course, in news, the Women, Family and Community Development Ministry reported that cases of domestic violence has hit a 3-year high with over 7,000 cases in 2024. Now, to put in some context, in 2022, there were 6,530 cases reported, 5,507 cases in 2023, and of course, a spike of more than 2,000 cases in 2025. Why do you think that, what's the reason for this sudden rise?
I think it is because there is an increased awareness.
Oh.
I mean, I this one personally I think lah.
Okay.
Because when people ask these questions, right, sometimes people think that maybe there are more domestic violence that are happening now. And that's why this number increased, you know. But I think the number is increased because these are the reported numbers, you know. And there's more reporting because there's an increased awareness that, okay, this is not acceptable behavior in a relationship. And I know that there is a legal protection that I can get. And I want to make a report on it. But this doesn't mean that before it doesn't happen lah.
I
because
agree,
sometimes I see also like people saying that, oh, dulu, you know, like this doesn't happen in our family, divorces doesn't happen. But that doesn't mean violence doesn't happen in those relationships, you know, with our grandparents or great grandparents. It's just because maybe people just accept it and normalize those behavior, you know, and thinking that, okay, you know, maybe it's a cultural or religious understanding of certain behavior that women feels that, okay, this is an acceptable behavior, or this maybe even expected behavior. If I do these things like this and then my husband is not happy with me, it's his right to shout at me or just give me a slap. It's fine. It happened to everyone. Do you know what I mean?
I've heard those similar stories, and I listen to it going, what the hell?
Exactly.
So in fact, I agree with you. I think the numbers would have been way higher in 1950s, 1960s, if not.
If we do more awareness program at that time, I believe that the numbers would be like higher then also.
Correct.
You know? I mean, even within our family, I don't know, but
same.
Correct, right? Our family as well, right? I mean, we saw how our grandfather treated our grandmother, even though maybe it's not physical, but that verbal, the way they talk, you know, but it seems like, okay, this is normal lah, you know, like
back then
it's normal lah, you know, it happens like in Indian family, it happens lah, all these kind of things, right?
No, but in fact, I watched, I think one of the first few James Bond movies. This was time of Sean Connery was James Bond, and there is a scene where he tells the girl, no, please go away because us men are talking. And I'm like, what?
Exactly. There are so many movies that I watched, movies that I used to love, like, you know, either Tamil movie or Bollywood movie that I used to love. And now when I watch it, I'm just like, my God, how did I enjoy this?
Oh, that's a bit too much.
This is so problematic. Things that we may think, oh my God, it was so romantic.
Yeah.
Like how he would stalk her, he would still come to her even though she said no to him.
Yeah.
Now it's like, no, you can't. This is not acceptable behavior anymore now, right?
And in that very same movie, I won't forget this James Bond movie, right? And it's James Bond, right? The icon of male bravado and all this. And he sort of like slaps her on the bum and say, go away, go. Men are talking. And I'm like, what is this? This is so silly.
Exactly.
Now, of course, we touched on this a bit earlier. In January, of course, of this year, there was a case reported that there was a woman who married a prominent Selangor lawyer who alleged that she was a victim of domestic violence for over 10 years. And another report in December 24 stated that another Malaysian actor who alleges 2 decades of domestic abuse at the hands of her husband, right? Why do these women suffer in silence?
I mean, like what we spoke about just now, lah. There are many reasons why women choose to stay in abusive relationship. It could be because of the children, could be because they are financially dependent on the abuser. Because when they got into the relationship, even though they may be highly educated, they went to university, they met in university, and then after that they got married, and they have children who are expected to leave work. Of course, in our society, is the women, and then after 10 years being at home, taking care of children, being financially independent on the women, they may not feel that they have that capacity to like leave this family and move on and, find a job or something like that. It could be that, And then it could be also social stigma, like how our society is shaped, right? If you are divorced, how society look at you, It could also be there's no support from the family, because there are many cases when a woman is being abused and she go back to her parents will say, sabarlah, dah suami kau, or, find a way to, build the relationship again. Think about your children, what would they have to go through if the father is not around, So there are a lot of this stigma in the society that will make a woman choose to stay in the relationship, There are women also, like what you say, like 2 decades. Maybe they wait until the kids already all finish education and everything. Then they decide, okay, maybe this is the time that I will leave my husband, right? And
But that's an interesting point that you bring up. So that means that society has a huge part in this.
Definitely.
How should we change ourselves to sort of bring down this number?
Yeah, I mean, as a society, we need to also change how our, this toxic cultural understanding, this gender norm, these gender stereotypes. Like when you talk about gender norms and stereotypes, as a man, this is how you should be. As a woman, this is how you should be. This need to change. This is why we talk about gender equality. When we talk about gender equality, always in minds, men would think like, oh my God, when you talk about gender equality, meanings that women want to be superior than men. But if women is superior than men, then there's no gender equality lah. Gender equality means that there's this respect and partnership, among the gender, right? So what society need to do is create more awareness. Be an active bystander. If you hear any toxic, harmful conversation about gender, about women, speak out, right? I mean, we hear this sometimes among our friends.
Yeah.
Sometimes we duduk kat mamak, we dengar meja sebelah something, say something, or we may even see like a woman being abused by the roadside or in public transport. What do we do? Do we just be quiet? No, we need to be an active bystander, There's these things that you call, jangan jaga tepi kain orang.
Yes.
But this jangan jaga tepi kain orang is jangan peduli orang tu balik pukul berapa, orang tu keluar dengan siapa. That is jangan jaga tepi kain orang. But if your neighbors or your friends, they are being abused by their partners, that is, you need to do something about it.
Yeah, definitely. But of course, in this being Malaysia, race and religion is a big part of our everyday life. Does race and religious elements play a part in a victim's interpretation of what is abuse and what is not, and what to sort of accept?
Yeah, I believe so. Like, there is this cultural or even religious understanding, right? Interpretation that shape how women view uh, abuse, or how they misinterpret certain behavior as acceptable, or as like, or they normalize it, and they feel that, okay, because I say these things, my partner become upset and he beats me up, and I deserve it lah. I shouldn't be that. I shouldn't be doing that. Or maybe because I dress this way, and he's not happy with how I dress, and that's why he's angry and he give me a slap. You know what I mean? So I do feel that it does influence lah.
Okay. Now, I just want to go back a bit on this and go a bit on a tangent because you talked about gender equality, right?
Right.
And that's a topic that I think is a very unique topic because it invokes a lot of different emotions, right?
Of course.
What is exactly the purpose of this gender equality debate? Do women want to be more than men, or do they? I mean, what's the whole thesis of it?
Okay, if you ask me,
Yeah.
if you ask other people, maybe it's a different interpretation. I mean, I'm a feminist. I believe in feminist value. I believe in respect. I believe in partnership. When we talk, and I, or my feminist friend talk about gender equality, what we mean is that respect and that partnership. Because if we look at in this world at the moment, who have a superiority in this world at the moment, it is man. Historically, it's been like that. This is the systemic power imbalance that we have in this world at the moment, right? So this is something that we need to correct. We need to have a same playing field, because at the moment in Malaysia, for example, we still have unequal pay between the gender.
Which I can't understand why.
Exactly.
For the
There
same
are
job.
many things that we don't understand, but it's happening, and this is why we need gender equality. And when we talk about gender equality, we need to mainstream it across every areas. It's not just about the public life, right? About work or in education system or whatever, but also private life, right? If we look in Malaysia, there is still this unequal power distribution between men and women, So this is what we talk about achieving gender equality. It's not about smashing patriarchy and then imposing matriarchy. That is not equality.
Yeah. But do you think that the topic of domestic violence also suffers from this? I would think that it suffers from the same problems that, say, topics like terrorism and all this face, whereby it's not assessed in a very simplistic, direct manner. Instead, it is always up for debate, up for discussion. Like, for example, let's say, terrorism, right? For me, I think it should be viewed as a criminal act. That's it. Any aggression to another person for whatever gain or for whatever means is a crime. Same thing with this, right? Because on your website, I see terms like toxic masculinity, gender-based violence. I'm thinking, wait a minute, isn't just violence? So shouldn't we change our approach to, rather than adding more terms to muddle this whole discussion, just go straight and talk. Look, if you are a person and your partner, regardless you're male or female, and you are being abused or you are being harassed in any way, that's wrong. Shouldn't we take that approach?
Yeah, I mean, definitely you are right. Because under our law, domestic violence is a crime. It is a criminal act. But the thing is, the reason why, we talk about toxic masculinity and all these kind of things is basically to maybe explain, like, like one of your question that asked whether is like man is always, I can't remember what was the question, like man always the abuser or something like that. I don't think like domestic violence is inherently gender specific.
Of course.
Faham tak? Meaning that abuser is shaped by the environment. So what is this environment, right? Environment that perpetuate gender stereotype, environment that accept toxic masculinity as the norm. So these are the things that we need to change. That's why it's also important to talk about these issues. I mean, like when a crime happened, there's always a backstory. A perpetrator or a murderer doesn't just born to be a perpetrator or born to be a murderer. I mean, this is my belief lah. It's always this environment that shape it. It could be this perpetrator saw violence attitude since young and think that this is normal. Like how a woman that maybe seen the mothers being abused think that
That's the way of life.
this is way of life, this is normal and stuff. A man who also see the father abusing the mother or family members think that, okay, as a man I have the right to educate my family. That is my responsibility. That's my role. That could be the thinking as well, right? And these are the thinking that we need to change. Like what I mentioned to you just now about how I mean, for Women's Aid Organization, we also looking. We actually already did a pilot project on engaging men in gender-based violence prevention. In fact, it's also it's actually my thesis paper for my master's study.
Okay.
Talking about the importance of actually having conversation with men for GBV prevention work. Because from the reason I choose this topic is because from my experience working in the NGO world for quite some time, I feel we always have conversation with women. Like how you recognize violence, how you respond to violence, what do you need to do. But we also need to have this conversation with men,
Of
with
course.
young boys,
Yeah.
how they can have the, change that, or have some, what we call it, the gender transformative attitude,
Yeah.
having understanding about healthy relationship,
Yeah.
understanding about consent, right? This is also important conversation because otherwise in our society, men will still be men because they think this is what men do. And
But-
that is what we need to change.
I understand, but also one thing when I read your website, right, I just get this feeling that our organizations and the discourse that is currently taking place in this field, how do I say this? It's a negative for men because some of the things that you talk about that you list under physical abuse, emotional abuse, and all
Yeah.
that can be anyone. It can be done by anyone, either gender, right? But do you think that the narrative nowadays forgives women too easily? And organizations such as yours, which you guys are doing fantastic work, but the narrative that you guys are pushing also becomes a way for women aggressors to sort of seek, be absolved from whatever they do because, it's society thinks that whenever there is an issue between a man and a woman,
Yeah.
say for example, a man is aggressive to a woman, it's the man's fault.
Yeah. Yeah.
But could it be that perhaps the woman is making him like that in the environment that she's creating a hell and from that hell this monster comes out?
Yeah. But actually, that's a very dangerous narrative. I mean, I get where you're coming from, and I do not deny that men could also be an abusive relationship and be a survivor of domestic violence or violence, right? But this narrative that is because the women that push the men to be a monster or something is is something that we need to treat gently in this kind of narrative because you see, disagreement can happen in relationship. It can happen. It's okay. But when you resort to violence, that is a problem. Either way, men or women. You need to maybe learn about healthy coping mechanism and not resort to violence. Because again, like how like what we talked about earlier, about it is always a choice that you do. When you can choose to leave the relationship then. But why do you choose to beat up your partner? Right?
But there could be other factors, right? Like children and all that. As you mentioned, why women don't leave,
Correct.
men won't leave for the same
Okay,
thing.
fine. But that means you resort to violence.
No, that's wrong. I unequivocally condemn any act of violence to anyone. I'm all for peace and the dialogue. But I'm just saying that could it also be that women get away with creating situations and then not having, and because of that, once they create that situation, they jump on this narrative so that they don't have to face the consequences
Yeah,
of
I
their
mean,
actions.
it could happen. I'm not saying everything is black and white. Like it's either this or either that. That could happen also. But I mean, this is something that we need to look at it case by case basis, right? In every relationship is different, but we also must uh like from data, from research,
Yeah.
from statistic
Yeah.
that shows that most of the time men's are the perpetrator, right? Whether even if, like, say, man is the survivor, the perpetrator is also man. It can happen that in a domestic relationship. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that is something that we need to look into lah. But of course, I'm not denying that in a relationship there's so many aspect that can happen, right? And the part about okay, because we are women's organization, do we always think women are right? Okay,
Yeah.
so of course, uh, like our services approach, we will believe the survivors. That is always the first point. Believe the survivor, but believing this, that because why we say that, because we need to know what is it that this person are saying. But that doesn't mean after that you don't do investigation lah. You believe the survivor, then you need to do the proper investigation, like, okay, what actually happened and all that kind of things. And as I say, I mean, like, when you, as a feminist, I don't think that women is always right. I don't believe in that, you know.
Because you're a socialist too.
Yeah, maybe because of that, I'm not, but it is very important for us to always believe the survivor because when someone say, okay, I'm being abused, if you already have that bias, for example, I'm talking about me as a service provider, you already have that bias in my head that, oh, betul ke tak betul ni, then it's saying how the society is functioning at the moment. When a woman go to a police station, the tuan polis will ask, betul ke ni, suami pukul and all that kind of thing, because it's very difficult for women to be believed in this society. So that's what we want to always say, that you believe the survivor, then you do your investigation lah. Yeah,
Okay.
find your evidence, right?
Okay, fair enough. Now, again, in that, to go back to that movie Made, there was a reference to this, and this is where I got the question from. What's the distance between domestic violence and death?
Well, violence can escalate. Often, I don't think like it's a big leap, because you see violence memang often escalate, right, into something that can be more severe, like severe injury, and also that we have these cases, and especially when there's no earlier intervention for the survivor, and there's no support. For example, when women go to police station or goes to speak to the family members and no one believe her, because sometimes actually these things happen where, I don't know whether you come across this situation where you also question whether is this really true that this perpetrator, that this man actually beat his spouse, because your relationship with this person is different, because what you know of him is like, oh my god, he's such a nice person, he's a good whatever, a good person, because like outwardly it seems that he's this person A, but in the family maybe he's this person B. Only the wife and the children know who he exactly is. Because the abuser would not show who he is to a real person.
Definitely.
So this happens sometimes. I mean, honestly, sometimes I also have this type of unconscious bias where I will question this kind of thing at the back of my head before it kind of like a split second hit me lah. Like, for God's sake, don't
Deal with the survivor.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So so this happen when people don't believe right? And people think that it doesn't happen, and it can escalate to that, And unfortunately, in our society, when the women die only, suddenly become a big story.
Yes.
Then is when you do the investigation.
Not before when she's
That's
alive.
when you say that, oh, this should have been done. Why this was not done? Suddenly all the top guns got involved. But when the woman goes to the police station many times saying that I'm being abused and everything, no one believe her. Or when she was given the protection orders, it was not. I mean, that's a law, but law pun tak enforce betul-betul. Right? Sometimes you have a protection order. What is that for? Is that just a piece of paper?
Yeah, exactly.
So this happened, unfortunately.
Now, I think you've touched on this quite a lot about environment. And one statistic that I found that was quite shocking was that from 2020 to 2023, Selangor reported the highest number of domestic violence cases with 4,690 reported cases. Now, when you know about Selangor, it's supposed to be the largest contributor of GDP to the country. We are very urban.
Yeah.
But why is it domestic violence is such a problem in Selangor?
Sometimes we think because we are in the city, we are urban, that means there's no violent, endorsing attitude and everything.
Yes.
Not necessary,
Yeah.
So sometimes it can, maybe again, it could be like more awareness, right? More awareness that we do a lot of program, workshop, project we do in this state.
So
Betul
that's
tak?
why.
So maybe people are more aware, about, okay, they have a legal protection. They can go to the police station. They can call the NGOs and stuff like that. And also, on the other hand, it could be like because they're more conservative in how they view some cultural or religious, their own cultural and religious understanding. It could be that also, because this is the misconception that sometimes I feel that we feel that if we that people in the urban area, they are more open minded, they're more liberal, they don't do this type of behavior, But actually, I've been to, like, for example, the East Coast, Northeast states of Malaysia, doing like workshops and stuff, and they are like even more open, the rural in the rural community, they're even more open to the concept of gender equality. So yeah.
Just another thing before I want to go on this, but another discovery on your website, which is WAO.org.
You really go through our website.
Yes,
You
yes.
dive deep into it. Bagus ah.
So if you guys want to check it out, it's WAO.org.my. Again, the link will be in the description. So if you guys want to contact them, please do at their website. Now, the age group between 26 to 35 years made up the greatest number of survivors and perpetrators. Why this age group?
Actually, maybe we need to do more research on that. But I guess it's because that age group is when you are navigating
Baru mula masuk kerja
significant
lah.
life transition.
Yes.
Betul
yes,
tak?
Yeah.
I mean, either you getting married, started having children, and then masuk kerja, so the career demands, and then the financial pressure, nak beli rumah, this kind of things that maybe, and then when there's no, which actually the stresses in the relationship, like the contributing factors that can lead to domestic violence if you do not have a healthy coping mechanism, or if you think this is an acceptable behavior, So I feel that's why this age group, there's more cases on the age group, but we need to do more research on this.
Now, again, let's just go to the abuser side, right? For a bit, can they be rehabilitated?
Yeah, I believe so.
You think can?
I believe everyone can change.
Okay.
So that's why the law that we have now, I don't think is enough lah. It's not sufficient for effective deterrence. I think. So it's not. You must involve like what you say, right? Counseling, rehabilitations. Because otherwise, if this man or this perpetrator that being abusive, if they are not helped, right, then they will continue doing this, right? I mean, they do this to one person, and then if they remarry, they can do it to the new family as well, So it just continue, and in the society, it will just become like a vicious cycle.
One, I don't know where I read this, but it was a very good suggestion that, like how they have a central database for pedophiles.
Yeah.
Should they have a central database for abusers?
Yeah, why not?
Right? It will make it easier for a woman and man to check,
To
this
check,
lady is
right?
abuser. Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I just feel that I think the I don't think somebody is born an abuser. I don't think so. Maybe please correct me if I'm wrong. But I think it has to do with power.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Power.
Yeah.
And I think that craving for power is an evolutionary, it's in our bones. And if it's not, some people just can't check it.
Yeah.
Right? They have to exert. And I don't think that can be rehabilitated. I
Yeah.
just don't.
Well, I think it can.
Okay.
You know, I mean, as I said, I mean, like, see what I believe as well. You know, like what you say. I don't think abusers are born like that. You know, they are shaped. They are shaped by the environment. They are shaped by the system that they're living in. You know, so these are the things that we need to change so that they can also change. And definitely, when you talk about, you are completely right talking about like how violence happen because of this power, right? They want to exert control, they want to exert power, you know. But what is power is something that they learn, right? That they believe this is what power is. You know, so that mentality or that perspective I believe that it can be changed lah.
Okay,
you
fair
know?
enough. Yeah.
I believe that it can be changed. You know, you
Okay.
just need to work on it. You know, the system need to change. Our society need to change.
All right. Now let's do a bit of help, add some value for people who perhaps are in relationships now, who are who maybe perhaps in your experience, maybe you can advise what are the red flags that people need to look out for to identify a potential abuser.
I think emotional manipulation when they gaslight you, when they isolate you from your friends or from your family. This happen, right, in relationship. In the beginning, everything is like rosy and you think that it's fine. It's because he loves me. That's why he doesn't want me to speak to the other man or the other friends, you know? And then later on, then you realize that, okay, this is like a bit weird already. So, you know, even like verbal abuse, you know, it always started like this, right? Verbal abuse, the threats, and, you know, yeah, I think these are all like red flags lah. Or even like maybe some weird mood swing, you know, sometimes you're okay and then suddenly you like shout at this person and then after that you say, I'm sorry, I didn't mean that, you know. So because I feel that if the abuser, right, when they are not emotionally stable, they are not happy, they make other people unhappy. So don't get into a relationship thinking that you want to find happiness. You yourself must be happy first. You yourself must be satisfied first. Then only you can make the other person satisfied.
That's
you
true.
know,
That's
and
true.
happy.
All
in a
right, fantastic. So
relationship.
there we go, guys. Red flags to look out for to avoid this. But I just want to go to something that you touched on, which is public health. And in a recent write-up published on Code Blue by Dr. Sean Thum and David Chung, read that Malaysia has made progress in tackling gender-based violence, GBV, but gaps remain in survivor support, legal protections, and healthcare. A public health approach, legal reforms, and inclusive services are vital for safety, justice, and recovery. Do you agree with this? And if so, what sort of public healthcare reforms would you like to be seen implemented?
Yeah, I mean definitely comprehensive reforms are very important lah, you know. And the public health reforms that I think is important is we need to include a more survivor centric healthcare services, you know, and also look at and also having the services just not enough. You also need to train the healthcare practitioner so they are more sensitive. They are equipped to recognize or to respond to domestic violence cases, right? And also make sure that, and very important also to also include the mental health support, you know, for the survivors. And it's also important to make sure that it's accessible to everyone lah. Sometimes you have the healthcare services but it's not accessible to the marginalized group. Then macam mana? Betul tak?
That's true. That's true. Now, we have seen, I think there was a report in FMT recently where a sentence was reduced to just a compound for an abuser. It was on FMT. Do you think that the punishment dished out to abusers are strong enough to act as a deterrent?
No,
No?
I don't think it's an effective deterrent from what we experience lah. Yeah, I mean like there is like punishment. I mean fine, or you go to jail up to a year or 2 years, something like this. Even then, sometimes it's not enforced. So I think we need to have more an effective. I mean, don't ask me like what can be more better punishment. I don't want to say that masuk jail 20 tahun ke apa. No, I'm not saying that. That's why the rehabilitation also is important, right? When someone is charged as a perpetrator, as a in like for domestic violence crime, you also need to make sure that this person go for counseling, rehabilitation, because otherwise it will just be repeated,
Yeah.
so we need to
Okay.
close that gaps.
Now, I just want to end this on this point. I think it's, I mean, I do feel strongly about this topic, and I hope people reach out to WAO and really, if you are going through it now, I think you must get help and get out of the situation before it goes, turns
Yeah.
too sour. But what is your advice right now to people who may be currently going through domestic violence as we speak?
Well, know that they are not alone, because sometimes when you are in a traumatic, abusive relationship, you feel that you have nowhere that you can seek help and you are alone, especially if you have experience talking to someone and then you were just being dismissed, But please know that help out there, you can contact WAO. There's also other NGOs. There's Awam, there's WCC in Penang, there's SAWO in Sabah, there's SWWS in Sarawak. So all around Malaysia, there is organization that can offer help, you know. The, all type of help. Like for example, in WAO, we have a shelter. We have a temporary shelter that if you you need to be safe and you have no other places to go, you can always come to our shelter for temporarily. And then we have a group of social worker that can assist you with case management, meaning like, okay, like if you need to make a police report, because sometimes you get intimidated, right? You don't know like at the police station what you need to say, what you need to do, So the organization can guide you, help you to make a police report or go to the one-stop crisis center, to get medical help, go to JKM, or to the court for protection orders, and also like assist you lah to reintegrate back to the society, help you with like empowerment programs and all that kind of thing. So please know that you're not alone and there's help out there. And if you need help, I mean, like when you decide that you had enough and you need to leave,
Leave.
we are here to assist you.
Now, I think you also touched on the fact that some women do not come out of these situations because they are fearful of a future out of the current present that they are in, regardless of the abuse that they face. In your experience, do you have any examples of women who have sort of left these abusive households and gone on to become,
Yeah, definitely. We have like many survivors that when they came to our shelters, like all broken, right? Because traumatized, broken. It's like you feel that when we as service provider, we as the NGO, the organization also feel like, oh my God, like how are we gonna help this person? Especially when they have children and all that kind of things. But I see women are strong. Once you already make that decisions, right, that you're gonna change your life now, believe that they would do it. We have many success stories of women who, like in this kind of relationship, and then when they come to our shelter and then they learn, because in our shelter we give like empowerment programs, and also like to help them with financial independence as well lah, because this is important, so we will ask them like what type of skills that they would like to learn. Some of them, they good at cooking and baking, and then they want to like try to sell their food online, for example. So then we give them like this digital literacy course, and like financial workshop, and then they started a business. This woman started a business, and now she's doing so well, and in fact she's giving back because she's also doing classes for our residents, in the shelter, like baking classes, and all this kind of things. So you definitely can, change your life. You want to change your life, you can change your life.
Thank you so much, Nazreen, for that. That was very inspiring, and I hope you guys have taken a lot of value from this discussion. So as I said before, guys, all the links will be shared in the description. So if you guys need to contact them, please contact them and get out of the situation and make a change in your life. Thank you, Nazreen.
Thank you, Vinod. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk about WAO and the work that we do.
You guys do fantastic work, and we would like to have you on again, talk about other issues as we discuss. Yes,
sure.
Very fantastic. Yeah. So, guys, that's all we have for you all today. Very fantastic discussion that I just had. Really enjoyed it, and it's a very important topic that we need to really address. So coming up next will be Arun Doraisamy talking about temple issues, temple challenges in Malaysia, as well as Arul Chelvam from PSM will be sharing his thoughts on Malaysian politics, and way more discussions coming your way. So we'll see you all soon. As always, please like, share, subscribe, and we'll see you next week. Bye.